Hey Geometry, this is notes number 2 for Unit 2. Our learning targets for today are I can prove that two lines are parallel, and I can construct a formal proof involving angle pairs created by parallel lines and transversals. So we have a new key term up first here. Our new key term is the converse. So converse is a statement made by swapping the if and then parts of another statement. So in our example, our statement says, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. So the if part says, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. My converse switches those. It's if the grass is wet, then it is raining. So they switch places. So we use the converse of the angle pair theorems that we did last class to prove that lines are parallel. So my corresponding angles postulate said if lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. Well, my converse does the opposite. It says if corresponding angles are let's use a pen. If corresponding angles are congruent, then lines are parallel. And then we do the same thing for all of our other different angle relationships. We just swap the if and then. So if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then lines are parallel. If same side exterior angles are supplementary, then lines are parallel. If alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And if same side interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. So this is kind of like working the problem backwards from what we were doing before. Before we were told that two lines were parallel, and we were trying to use our angle relationships to find missing measurements. Now we're given some angle measurements and we're trying to determine if lines are parallel. So in our first set of practice problems, we are trying to determine if it is possible to prove that lines P and Q are parallel. And if so, state the postulate or theorem you would use. So what I'm going to do for these problems is first, look at my angles, find my transversal, all the same stuff we were doing before. So for this first one, I'm going to highlight my transversal. I'm going to shade the interior. Oh, that's so distressing. My door keeps closing by itself. I'm pretty convinced the school is haunted. So I identified my transversal, I shaded the interior. These are the two angles I was given. So I need to look at what angle relationship these angles represent. So these angles would be corresponding. They're both located in the same corner at each intersection. So I look up here at my corresponding angles converse, which says if the angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So the two angles that I was given are congruent, so I can say that P is parallel to Q because of the corresponding angles converse. So I did a little shortcut there. I abbreviated because, I abbreviated corresponding, and I used the symbol for angles just to make my life a little easier. So I want you to do the same thing for the next three problems. Pause the video, try it out, see if you can identify if those lines are parallel and what their angle relationship would be. Okay, I hope you actually paused the video and tried these. Here are the answers. For the second one, yes, your lines are parallel. It's same side interior angles converse. Third one, they're not parallel because those angles are vertical. Last one, they are parallel because of the corresponding angles converse. All right, for the next ones. Find the value of x that makes P parallel to Q. So same idea. I need to find my angle relationship. And now I have to make my lines parallel. So for this first one, these angles are corresponding angles, which means for my lines to be parallel, they need to be congruent. So I'm going to set up an equation to find out what x should be. So these angles should be congruent, so that means 3x should equal 45. So x would have to be 15. If x is 15, that would mean both of these angles have the same measurement and my angles are congruent. Same thing for the next one. Find out what your angle relationship would be, determine the value of x that would make them congruent, pause the video, come back and check your answer. Okay, for the second one, those angles are alternate interior. For lines P and Q to be parallel, those angles need to be congruent. So x would have to equal 30 degrees. So now let's kick it up a notch. We are gonna write some proofs, but first we're going to look at a more complicated diagram. Let's see if I can rotate this. Is that any better? No, that's not better, sorry. So we are going to use the figure and the given information to determine which lines, if any, are parallel, and justify using a theorem or postulate. I highly recommend you get out some colors here, maybe colored pencils, highlighters, maybe something erasable, I don't know, whatever's gonna work for you. I'm gonna be color coding a lot of things. So the first one says that angle 9 is congruent to angle 16. So I'm going to mark that on my diagram. Here's angle 9, here's angle 16. If I'm looking at these two angles, I'm gonna kind of cover up the rest of the picture that I don't need. So I don't have any angles over here on this side that I'm interested in right now. So I'm gonna kind of cover those up and ignore them. If I'm looking at these two angles, my transversal would be line D, and my parallel lines would be lines A and B. So I can say that A is parallel to B, and 9 and 16 are on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're in the exterior. So this is because of the alternate exterior angles converse. Okay, for the next one, I'm looking at a different pair of angles, so I'm gonna erase all this stuff. It's gonna be a pain in the butt for you to erase all of that on yours. So I would say when we cover things up, just like cover it up with your hand, cover it up with your index card. It'll make your life a little easier here. So for the next one, we are told that angle 5 is congruent to angle 7. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get rid of this part of the diagram that I don't need. I'm not looking at those right now. My transversal would be line C, which means my parallel lines would be A and B again. So I can say A is parallel to B. Angle 5 and angle 7 are corresponding angles. So my reason would be the corresponding angles converse. Okay, pause the video, try the next 3, and come back to check your answers. Okay, here's the answers. For 16, we get A is parallel to B again because of the corresponding angles converse. For 17, that information doesn't tell us any lines are parallel. And for 18, that tells us that C is parallel to D because of the alternate interior angles converse. Okay, proofs. We're gonna write one proof together, and then I'm gonna let you try the next two on your own. So when we are writing proofs, you will probably want to get out your notes from Unit 1 about all of the properties and theorems from that last set of notes that we did. So we are going to start with the given information and marking things up on our diagram. So we are given that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So I'm going to mark that on the picture. I know these are equal to each other. So they each get the same mark. The first statement in my proof is given, always, every time. The next line in my proof says angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So I'm going to go back to my diagram and look at angle 1 and angle 3. Why can I conclude that these angles are congruent? Well, these angles are a pair of vertical angles. So my reason here would be the definition of vertical angles. The next line in my proof says angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. Well, if I look at my diagram, that makes sense. I knew that 1 was congruent to 2 because that was given. I know 1 is congruent to 3 because those are vertical angles. So 2 and 3 both have the same marks on them, which means they have to be congruent. So the question is this substitution or is it transitive? Remember, for it to be transitive, I need that repetition to happen in the center. So it's like when we were saying Jessica is the same age as Joe, Joe is the same age as Henry, so Jessica is the same age as Henry. We needed Joe to repeat in the middle. I don't have that repetition here. Angle 2 is not repeating in the center. So this is not transitive. This would be substitution. And if I know angle 3 and angle 2 are congruent, I can say that my lines are parallel. So we have to think, why are we allowed to say that? What kind of relationship do angle 2 and angle 3 have? Well, those angles are corresponding angles. So because they are congruent, we can use the corresponding angle's converse to finish this proof. These are going to be hard for most people. Proofs take a lot of getting used to. So pause the video for real, take some time, try it out, draw things on your diagram, color code, think about what's happening, how did we know that, what given information told us that, what caused that to happen. Keep asking yourself those questions as you try the next two proofs. Okay, here are the last two proofs, fully completed. If you have any questions about these, or you're not sure where some of the statements or reasons came from, definitely make sure you ask. You're also going to get a little bit more practice writing these proofs during your practice in class today.